And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us, and one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it, and that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tells. I'm your host, Brandon Wright. Tonight we're going to be joined by my guest, Bob Freeman. He's also known as the Occult Detective. He's joining me live here tonight in my studio. Definitely looking forward to talking with him, diving into a lot of things here. But before we bring Bob on, if you've ever had an experience and you'd like to be on an episode of Tinfoil Tells, there's a couple things you can do. You can either go to tinfoiltells.com and go to the contact section, or you can just send an email to tinfoiltellspodcast@gmail.com. Either way will work, so just make sure to send me a message and we will get something scheduled for a future episode. If you'd like to help the podcast out, please continue to share it around. Word of mouth is the best way of helping the podcast. The more you share it around, the more potential new guests are able to find the podcast, which means more episodes coming your way. You can also help out by leaving a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to Tinfoil Tells at. And if you'd like to become a member of the Patreon, you can find more information about that in the show notes. There's a paid tier and a free tier. With the paid tier, you get early access to all of the episodes, and they're all ad-free. You get some of the bonus content and everything that's available on the Patreon for $1.99 a month. So again, check out the show notes for a link to the Patreon. Follow me around on all the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, X. But we are going to go ahead now and dive on into the conversation with Bob. Definitely looking forward to talking with him, and I hope you guys enjoy the conversation. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to take this time to welcome my guest in studio today, Mr. Bob Freeman, the Occult Detective.
Thank you very much.
How did you earn the name the Occult Detective?
Well, I suppose it's what I do. When I was younger, in my 20s, I had the opportunity to help out the local DNR on a few cases. And then I worked on a case with the police in Muncie after there was a homicide and the killer had left a mark on the window and they didn't know what that was. I was at Ball State University at the time, and my specialty was witchcraft, magic, and religion. And so when they came and asked the anthropology department if they knew what the symbol was, they had me check it out. And so, yeah, I guess that's kind of how it all came to be. And I write occult detective fiction as well, so it just seemed to stick.
This is something you've been doing for how many years now?
I mean, really my whole life, but I formed my first paranormal group in 1983. So, yeah, quite a few years, over 40 now.
I said the year before I was born.
Yeah, right. We started it in high school. I was a junior in high school when we started. And, I mean, unless you want to go way back, we had a ghost hunting group in elementary school. We called ourselves the Monster Squad. And we used to go around, sneak into abandoned houses and old barns, just looking for ghosts and monsters and all that kind of stuff. So I just grew up with it.
Right.
You know, there's so many like urban legends and stuff around in where we live here in the Midwest, north central Indiana.
In the cornfields.
Exactly. And I mean, it's just like, so when I was growing up, it was the 70s, right? And so The Exorcist had come out, Rosemary's Baby. It was just, the occult was everywhere. Mm-hmm. And so whenever you go to a babysitter's house or whatever, the teenagers were doing seances, Ouija boards, all that stuff. And, you're a little kid, right? And you're sucked into all that stuff. So I was just obsessed at a very early age, and just an insane attraction to magic, the occult, and all those kind of strange monsters and such.
Yeah. It's kind of what we're talking about off air, is how as a young kid I was with Godzilla and King Kong and everything else. Like, there's certain things that interest you, and then when I grew up, I just had a love for all sorts of monsters. I think that's why I'm a big fan of looking into cryptids, because just the weird attraction to them from just at a young age.
And I think, in a way, that early attraction that you have when you're young like that, just the way the universe works, you end up attracting that sort of stuff to you, right? Because you just, synchronicities just work that way, right? And if you put yourself out there in the universe, then the universe answers.
Now, I've begun to start to realize that some of the things that I do may have impacts on some of the things that I see or do too, because I think once you start looking into things, they do kind of look back. And
exactly, yeah.
Someone warned me about that when I first started this show, that when you start looking into things, sometimes the things start looking back at you. And I was like, well, that's kind of like quoting Nietzsche or whatever it's pronounced as. But
yeah,
I think there's some truth to that.
I think there is too. And that, I've spent so many years, ghost hunting and such, and you just, you'll go to a site and it's almost like you attract the spirits. Like, there's this place I host ghost hunts at, and I'll get everybody started. I'll show them around the place, tell them all the stories, and then I cut them loose, and I'll stay downstairs while they're investigating on the floors above me. An hour might go by, and then they come down and say, it's dead, nothing's happening. So, all right, hang on. I go upstairs, and within 5 minutes, you start hearing knocks. Stuff starts moving around. They're comfortable with me, and they'll come out to play, and then, okay, there you guys go, and then it'll be crazy active the rest of the night. So, yeah, some people just kind of have that appeal, and, well, that's another thing, I guess. We're just going to bounce all over the place here. One of the things I think that most paranormal investigators, kind of err at is that you can't really bounce from haunted location to haunted location, like a weekend warrior kind of thing.
Right.
You really need to settle down in a place. Like this place I'm talking about that I host at, I've been investigating there since 2006, almost every weekend. And so that's how you get to know what's going on there. Otherwise, it's all just superficial. So,
is that the place that's, I don't want to say the town, but like where I used to live, where you live at? That's the most common place I hear about from
exactly.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to discuss it.
Right.
It's a confidential location. But anybody can reach out to me and get you in. You just have to agree not to.
Right.
You can take video, you can take pictures. You just have to make sure you're careful not to give away the location.
Right. No, I've heard about some stuff when we lived there, kind of about how that place was supposed to be haunted, but I never looked into it because I've never been an avid hunter, I guess you want to call it. Like, I've wanted to, but at the same time, I've just never had done it because I'm still somewhat hesitant about the whole thing because I'm a paranoid type of a person. So it's not that I'm afraid of something bothering me. I'm just afraid of bringing something back with me.
Sure. There are things you can do to protect yourself from that. But, I understand completely. Some people just aren't ready for that, because I've brought stuff home with me before. I can remember one night I was sitting out. I had a shack, similar to what we're sitting in right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I had it full of books, and it's where I used to write my novels. And I'm sitting there one night, and I hear the door open behind me, and I'm still typing away. I'm assuming it's my wife, maybe my son. It's 1 a.m. And then I feel breath on the back of my neck. And then I feel a hand on my shoulder. And then I'm sure it's my wife. And I turn and look, and there's nobody there. And so I go, okay, I brought something home. So I go to work trying to, send it back. But those things happen.
Mm-hmm. That's just been my fear. Beforehand, like before I had kids or anything like it, I didn't really think too much about stuff like that. But now that I have a family, it's kind of like, I don't want to press that button these days.
Right, exactly. It's the last thing you want to do is put your family in harm's way.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes spirits can be,
That's why I moved out here to get out of the house, because sometimes I'm thinking that some of the weird things that happen, maybe it's because I've talked about things or opened up something unintentionally and brought it around. So who knows?
Sure. Keep it here.
Right. The other day, I have security cameras set up in here, and they're motion detected, so they'll start recording if there's something, and I wasn't at home, but my phone goes off, and it picks up a shadow moving, but it also picked up that shirt on the wall started to move. So I'm thinking it was because that must have kicked on. The air conditioner maybe have kicked on.
Okay.
But it's never done that before or after. So it's just kind of strange that it's only done it one time in the last 3 weeks that I've had all this set up out here.
Right. You would think that every time that kicked on,
it would do that.
Get that reaction.
Right. And it's never done that.
Yeah.
So
that would lead me to think that, yeah.
So for me, it's just like, I'm going to write it off as explainable, but at the same time, it's not really, I can't say one way or the other.
Right. Well, keep an eye on it. And
I got a notification yesterday, and it was just, again, it picked up a shadow moving, and that was it. There was nothing, the air conditioner hasn't been on. So it wasn't because of that. So what made the shadow?
Right. Yeah.
Like
there's no light
right
in here to speak of.
No. So I've got pretty much curtains up on the windows, so I don't know what have made the shadow, but you can see the shadow just gets, like right here on the corner of the desk, it just gets brighter, like the curtain had moved. But that's not been on, because it hasn't needed to be on.
So out of curiosity's sake, what was the show you did right before that it happened? Do you remember?
Yeah. It was, it's actually from Kokomo. The girl Ariel, my friend Ariel, she said she used to live in a haunted house in Kokomo.
Okay.
And the very next day, I'm getting that.
Right. Okay. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
That's why I said this is why I come out here, because of things that we talk about. I don't want it in my own house.
Yeah, I understand completely. I think you made a wise decision on that.
So, but no, we talked last Sunday about her coming out, and she talked about how she grew up in this haunted house. She called it the Hell House or the Demon House on Boulevard.
Really?
Yeah. So I actually know exactly where the house is, because I have family. My daughter, ironically, went and stayed at my aunt's house, who lives not too far from there, just a couple houses down. I was like, that's strange. Weird coincidence.
Yeah. That is strange. So does somebody live in the house now?
Yeah. I don't know. She's never talked to me. I gave her the suggestion to maybe write a letter. Mail them a letter. Right. I said, if you don't want to go in person, mail them a letter, see if they'll mail you back, give them an email address to email you.
Well, I mean, I'd love to go check the place out, but the opportunity came up. I mean, that's kind of what I do.
Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to local stuff, I'm always curious about it, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know. I don't want to push the vibe too much.
Yeah, sure.
Just because, like I just mentioned, I don't want to bring something back.
Well, and I can remember one time I had a novel out, and I was doing the book signing tour, and I'm set up, signing autographs and such, and this woman walks up to me and she says, "Do you do exorcisms?" And I'm like, "Well, I can, but I mean, I'd need to know more about what you're talking about, what's going on with you." And so she starts telling me a story about her husband, whose behavior has changed, and and she thinks he's possessed.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, look, I'd have to speak to him. I'd have to have permission, but you should probably look into the psychiatrist first.
Right.
I mean, you need to go down that avenue. Don't just jump to the conclusion. So this went on. I had given her my number. She called me and asked me, could I please come? And so I said, well, I'll come and I'll talk to him. I'll just have a conversation with him. Nothing more than that. So I show up on their doorstep and, I asked if I could come in. He said no. I said, well, your wife was concerned and she thought maybe we could have a talk, and said, I'm not interested in speaking to you. Okay. There's nothing I can do there.
All right.
So I leave, and like a couple of days later, commit suicide. So, I mean, that was, gut wrenching for me, because you second guess everything, right? Should I have done more? Should I have done less?
Right.
I didn't discuss anything supernatural with the guy, but at the same time, this woman was reaching out for help. And, this was, 20 years ago. But that's always in the back of my mind is, what could I have done differently? And, it just.
Yeah, that's one of those situations to where you're always going to wonder if you could have done more or less or anything like that. So.
Right.
I don't want to dive into any of that on air, but there was a situation that I felt like that happened years ago that could have been maybe a little different if I would have done something. I don't know. But at the same time, it's like I wasn't even around, so I couldn't have prevented certain things to happen. But at the same time, it's like
right.
You kind of feel like one of the last things you said to somebody, and then a few days later, they're not here anymore, and you're just kind of like, man.
Right.
You kind of hold that regret after a long time.
Yeah, my brother passed away, last year, almost exactly a year ago, and a couple of weeks away. And, yeah, boy, I beat myself up over that quite a bit because I could have done more there.
Right.
Hell, I could have. But then again, that the other person has to be receptive. So.
Yeah. It's one of those things like, there's not much anyone can do about it at that point. And then you just, as much as it sucks, it's just kind of like one of those regrets that you're going to have.
Right.
But I know when we talked in person back in, I think, March for one of the local UFO meetings, you'd mentioned that there was some weird instances happening not too far from here, because that night I took my son and my friend and we went out looking for these flying humanoids.
Right.
I've mentioned on in a couple episodes that someone had told me about them. So I went to those areas, we drove around, and I obviously didn't see anything besides a bunch of deer and raccoon.
Right.
But that's the one instance that I wanted to go out looking for him. I told my 11-year-old, I was like, hey, I'm going to use you as bait tonight. He's like, what? It's like, I'm going to have you get out, and you stand here, we'll see what happens. He wouldn't get out of the truck.
That's great. Yeah, it's, being what I do, I get calls. And in fact, I just talked to 2 people here in the last week over things. So the incident that we had discussed was, it's been a year ago, or not quite, maybe. It was in the winter. And 2 separate women within a week called and reported these. Well, the first woman said she was driving across a local bridge, and she saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. She thought it was a man wearing a trench coat. And so she slows down, and he's not moving. So she stops, and then the coat opens up, and it kind of look like wings.
Right.
And then he just flies straight up in the air. And so that's interesting. So I've driven across that bridge 100 times since, right? But, and then like a week after that, another woman calls and said she was driving near that same area. And as she's driving by, she sees what she thinks is a man standing against a tree, just kind of leaning up against it off the side of the road. And then all of a sudden he kind of slides up the tree, no wings or anything, but just like he slides up the tree, like he's, levitating up it with
Right.
its back against it. So, yeah, that's odd. And then just this past week, I had somebody who was out in another area, again, not too far from that bridge, but in west of where that was. And they saw a figure out in like one of the little hunting trails
Mhm.
they were back on. There was a guy out scouting around trying to decide where he was going to hunt. And he saw just a dark figure in the woods watching him, and like red reflective eyes is the way he described it. And then it kind of made itself bigger, and he got the impression that it had these big wings. So again, it's like, okay, that kind of ties into that other.
Right.
And then the other call I got a few days ago was a woman and her husband and son were out at one of the most sacred sites in this part of the country. They were out there for a hike, and they saw these little people. She described them as squirrel men. Okay?
Mhm.
Short, little, gray-furred people. It looked like the fur of a squirrel. And they started throwing rocks at her and her son. And so they kind of got freaked out. And she's like moving along the riverbank, trying to get away from them. And then she almost runs into a guy right in front of her in full Indian dress. And, long hair, weathered, dark skin. And she says, "Oh, excuse me." And he holds up his left hand and nods at her. And she steps around him. And when she looks over her shoulder, there's nobody there. Now, her son was a few yards in front of her. And he stopped and said, "Hey, are you okay, Mom?" And she goes, Yeah. And he goes, "What are you talking to?" There's nothing there. So he saw the whole thing, but he didn't see the Indian figure. So that's weird connection. Now, of course, that area is known for, what the Miami Indians called Pesa, which are like little people.
Right.
And some people call them Pukwudgies or
Mm-hmm. That's what I was thinking of when you said
yeah, exactly. So
plug wedgies.
there's a place not far away from that kids called Hobbit Land.
Right. I've mentioned that a few times.
Yeah, Hobbit Land is just a magical place. I've been going out there since I was a kid. When I was really little, like maybe 8 years old, there were these guys in Converse, or in the town we're from, who had said they caught one and had it in a bird cage down at a local trailer park in like a garage that was down there. So we're like, "Oh, you're kidding me. What? They caught one of the little people." So we go down, and the guy who was, "Hey, you got to let us see this thing." So, the guy takes us out there, opens it up, and the bird cage is in there, but it has been ripped to pieces. And said, "Oh, it escaped." So, they pull on a little kid's leg, or
Right.
did they catch one? I who's to say? But
I've always wondered about that because, and I've mentioned it on recent episodes, but when I was about 8, there was something that was down in the ditch line between my parents' house and my grandparents' house. We always called it the gully. And my cousins and I went down there, and for whatever reason, they wanted to throw rocks at this mound we found. And this little thing come running out. I don't know what it was. I just seen something running, and I ran, and we all ran and screamed because we were like little kids.
right,
They swore it was a goblin.
okay. Yeah,
And I don't know. I just know, I thought as I got older, it had to have been like an animal, like a swamp rat or a muskrat, not swamp, but a muskrat or a possum. Who knows what it was, but I was like, they were adamant it looked like a goblin.
all right. So during the pandemic, probably the biggest thing in high strangeness was Hellier.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So for me, watching it, it reminded me very much of my childhood growing up. You know, the way they were going out and investigating things, the weird stuff that was happening.
Right.
Reminded me of when I was like late teens, early 20s. Same kind of stuff. So they start talking about these goblins. They start talking about Somerset, Kentucky, right?
Mm-hmm.
And goblins around Somerset. And I'm like,
And there's a Somerset right out here.
with goblins,
Right.
you know, it's just like a weird connection. So I'm talking about this with one of my friends in England, and I'm mentioning Somerset and goblins, and he thinks I'm talking about Somerset in England and the goblins there.
Right.
And it's just like, it's a weird synchronicity.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Somerset that's around here, that was the actual town that was under the now lake, wasn't it? That's the town they had to move.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So the Somerset that you know is, yeah, it's just, it was transplanted.
I've wondered, did they transplant the graves and stuff too? Or they leave those under the water?
They supposedly they moved them, but you know they didn't move them all,
No.
right? And when the water's down out there, that's the best time to go out and explore, because there's caves out there that you can go into once the water's down, and you see the foundations of the old buildings,
Yeah.
and you can go out to where the old graveyard was, and yeah, it's then there's the, you know, a stray marker you'll see now and then. That to me is the heart of all the high strangeness in this area. You know, Somerset was always a place where, you know, it was like almost like an artist's community, right? So people would come there during this fall. Poets would be writing poetry about the area. You know, painters came out and painted all that area. So it just attracted people because it had a mystical quality about it. And there were, you know, all kinds of psychics and stuff that moved in and around that area at that time. And then, yeah, it was gone.
What was the reasonings, like the official reasonings as to why they wanted to basically relocate it so they could build the dam and flood it over?
Because of flooding. Peru, basically.
Okay.
Right? Peru would get flooded out, and so they built the dam to protect that seat.
When did they build the dam? It was the 60s, wasn't it?
66.
So I don't remember.
Year I was born.
I don't really ever hear about flooding in town, though.
Well, not now.
Well, like even like before then, like unless they've done stuff that they don't talk about, but you never really hear about a lot of floods in Peru.
If you dig deep, you can find there were a couple of big floods.
Okay.
But still, I hate that they did it.
Mm-hmm.
The weird thing is where they built the dam. They built it on top of 7 artesian wells that were in a row. This holy magical place where they built it right on top of the dam, or right on top of those wells.
Mm-hmm.
So the dam is a mess because that water's still coming up, right? And it's slowly eating away at it. And that dam's going to come down at some point because of it. They're going to have to completely rebuild it. But I always wondered, did they do that on purpose? Was there some mystical
Trying to
reason?
cap it off.
Yeah, trying to stop, because this is an area of extremely high strangeness. I mean, it is. You've had experiences here. I've had experiences here. You know, I could talk about the werewolves that we ran into out along Goose Creek, the weird covens that used to be in this area and perform all kinds of strange magic. You'd run into them at times, and they were pretty sinister, you know. And this was back during the Satanic Panic, too, right? So, just so many things, and I just always wondered if the government did that on purpose, trying to quell whatever was going on here.
I just know from people that I've talked to that were older, and by older I mean they're probably in their 80s now.
Right.
they talked about during the 50s and 60s, there was a lot of crazy stuff that used to go on around this town. That they said because with the base being close, and then they had the train tracks or whatever, like they said there's a lot of weird things that used to happen, especially just on the south side of town. They claim, I think this was even back in the era of when Prohibition. Supposedly somebody from Chicago's like mafia thing had a house just on the south side of Peru, right on the other side of the river, and that's where they used to have all their liquor. They used to be smuggling through there, and they used to smuggle a lot of stuff, and I know exactly where the house is because there's supposedly hidden trails that go through the woods that come out to the back for escape hatches for where the police would come out and raid. So there's all sorts of weird little lores from that town.
Just to tie into that, not too far away from there, like out in the Okefenokee area, right? That's where the Chicago mob used to come down and bury bodies, right? They come all the way down here, bury them all in those woods. So, Yeah.
Which Okefenokee is literally just about 5 miles from that whole location, too.
Right. Yeah.
We actually talked about that on a recent, my Mothman episode, that you can't even get back there anymore.
Yeah, they've got it all.
They had that random murder that was back there, 2019 or 2018 or something. Ever since then, they've shut it down, which I used to go camping out there.
Well, yeah, sure, yeah.
But
I remember, I'm old enough that, I predate internet ghost hunting or TV ghost hunting. And growing up where I did, we didn't have cable or anything, right? So I didn't know that stuff even existed, really. But I'm out at Okefenokee one night, going out to do my thing, and there's these two guys out there. And I said, hey, how's it going? What are you guys doing? We're hunting ghosts. Oh, yeah? Yeah, well, I never ran into other ghost hunters anywhere. But
kind of taboo back then.
Yeah, and they've got these strange devices. What's that? Well, this is a K2 meter, like on Ghost Hunters. What the hell's Ghost Hunters? So they say, yeah, it's a show that's on TV. Is how they hunt. So, okay. Wow, that's weird. All right. 2 weeks later, I'm out at Hobbitland doing the same thing that I've always been doing. And there's like 4 people out there. It's like, hey, how's it going? What are you guys doing? We're out on ghosts. And they got K2 meters and stuff also. And it's like, oh, okay, that's, and now you can't throw a rock and not hit people that hunt ghosts.
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
It's become more commercialized.
Yeah, I mean, like TikTok and YouTube, and it's just full of that sort of thing. And some people are forthright and, fighting the good fight, and some people are in it for money and faking stuff. And so it's a weird minefield that you got to go through.
That's kind of how it is with, I think, everything at this point. Like, even your cryptid people, your UFO people, like, everyone's got their thing to sell.
Yeah, sure. I get it. You love something, and you want to try and make money off of it, right? It makes sense. That's what they always tell you. Find out what you love, make that your career, that kind of thing. But some people take it a little far. And you can tell when people are disingenuous, and
yeah, for me, any money I make off the podcast is literally covering
right
payments. I don't make money. I'm still in the negatives.
Yeah, right. Well, look, I've been doing this, for 40 some years. I'm in the hole. I'm in a deep hole. That's okay.
It's like with all the equipment I've invested in for just recording purposes, the $7,000 barn that I'm paying for, and then all the extra stuff I've had to put in this,
yeah,
I'm in pretty deep.
Yeah, yeah. But you know what? It's because you love it,
right?
And, So I try not to worry about it too much. What I don't do is I don't pay to go hunt places. That's like people are always saying, hey, you should go to Waverly. That place is really haunted. I said, well, I've been to Waverly. Back when we used to snake our way through the fence and go into the place back, before it was a location, that people paid for. The same way with, like all these places that now charge money. It's like, oh, I've been there, but back before it was a thing, before it was a cottage industry.
The first time I ever heard Waverly, I was thinking they were talking about the little town over here.
Oh, yeah,
New Waverly.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's a haunted place over there? And then I was like, oh, Waverly Hills down in, that's Kentucky, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's a lot of places I've seen on those TV shows and everything. I was like, I'd actually love to go there, but I don't want to go with a bunch of people.
Right. It defeats the purpose. Okay. Like the location that I host things at.
Mm-hmm.
We're there one night, and I won't name the group, but they're a large organization, and they had booked it for the weekend. And I said, well, how many people's coming? No, we'll probably have 10, 15. Okay, all right, we can deal with that. So they show up, and there's like 4 people.
Right.
Okay. Again, it doesn't matter. We didn't charge money. But so that we started investigating, and they were talking about how they just had a meeting and people were, they didn't want to come out. And stuff started really ramping up. I mean, very serious. And within 45 minutes, I had 36 people there. Because they got on their phones, called, hey, can you believe what's happening here? They got all their members. They all just flooded into that place. And I said, you guys are ridiculous. You're not going to get anything. With that many people walking around, you're not going to get any EVP. You're not, you're going to scare off whatever.
But so many people, I've always thought you're going to get noise pollution.
Exactly. It's always, I've always thought 3 people max were the best. If you're just wanting to have a good time with your friends, 6, 8, 10 people, okay, fine. But you're not there collecting evidence. You're just there having fun.
Yeah. The shows that have like camera crews that follow them and everything, I'm like, you're having so many extra people out there that you're literally contaminating things just by having the extra people.
Right. And I get it. I like it when they do it where they're their own cameraman.
Mm-hmm.
Then at least and I've watched so many of those shows now. I can tell you which ones, I believe and which ones I know are just kind of.
I think a lot of it's made for TV these days.
Yeah, and it has to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's they're in it
for entertainment purposes.
Yeah,
that's where I've struggled when it comes even with this show is I've talked with another podcaster and he's explained like regardless of how I see it, like the whole monetizing the podcast, it's basically like when I was in a band and I'd go and play a show, did we get paid? I was like, well, no. I was like, we were supposed to, but we didn't half the time.
Right.
But he said, you're still performing at a place. You're a form of entertainment. You're providing people something to listen to, even though you're seeing it differently. It's still a form of entertainment.
Right.
So it's hard for me to accept that. But like when people listen to these shows, they hear these random ads. I hate the ads.
Yeah.
Like, I hate the commercials and everything, but, like, just as people watch TV, you see commercials, you hear them on random radio stations. Like, it's the way it goes.
Right. You're not your own radio station.
Right.
So those people, they have to make money. It's like when people complain about ads on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
All right. They've got people they got to pay.
Mm-hmm.
They've got those massive servers that are hosting that stuff. They've got to make money somehow.
Right.
And, but the way people think now, everything needs to be free,
mm-hmm.
right?
There's nothing free at this
How
point.
can there be? I mean, how it's we were talking about bands. How do bands make it today?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no record sales.
Uh-uh.
It used to be okay. They'll get the whatever venue. This they're taking money at the door. They're selling merch, but now the quote unquote record labels are demanding a cut of all that.
Right.
I don't know how they do it.
Now venues, my other podcast when we were doing it was the music related one, and venues today are taking merch cuts.
Yeah.
Like that to me, I was like, you didn't pay anything from getting this stuff designed, printed, selling it, and now you want to take 20%, 30% of a merch sale.
Yeah.
Screw that.
Yeah, no. I
haven't done music stuff since the pandemic, and I miss it, but at the same time, I don't.
Right.
Just because of how it sounds, it's gotten to the point of being like it's more of a headache than it is.
Yeah.
That's why I do the podcast now. I was like, I have to have some sort of creative outlet.
Right. Well, it's a good avenue for it.
No. You mentioned the werewolf. We talked a little bit about this before, but definitely want to let the audience hear about that.
Yeah, okay. So there's a place called Goose Creek. And when we were kids, we used to go out there and perform magic rituals. And it's this road that used to go across and up this hill, but because of the reservoir, it's most of the time it's underwater.
Right.
So about October, all the water's down. The road's still there. It's exposed when the water drops. And there used to be a bridge. Bridge is gone, so it's like this big chasm. So we'd go out there and do stuff. And there's these dead trees sticking up out of the water that just like look really creepy. It's just a great place. So one year we went out to revisit the place. And this was back in 87, maybe. And we're out there on that road where we had once, had a big magic circle. We're looking back from the way we came, and we see these like red lights in the woods, low, like reflective, and there was a full moon out, right? So just, what the hell is that? It's kind of creeping us out, So we start walking towards it, and as we get closer, we can see these hulking dark shapes, and they start growling, It's like, holy crap. Was it a pack of wolves? What here? It's like, and so, of course, I'm telling you, like, stay calm. Let's just move up the road and get away from them. And then one of the guys we're with, he just scared. He bolts running. And those figures, they come charging out of the woods at us, growling. Rah. So we all turn and we're running up this road. And you can hear them right on you. You don't dare look back. And there's a barricade at the top of this road. And we're jumping over it, running, climbing in the car. Turner, there's nothing there. But it was, to all of us, they were wolves, but larger. And so they'll tell you that there are no wolves here where we live.
Right.
But we know better. We've seen tracks out along the trails. I mean, they tell you there are no big cats either, but
people have caught them on
trail cams. And a guy with the DNR told me, well, wherever there are mountain lions, there are wolves, because the wolves will come in, follow the big cats around. Cats will take a kill, and then they'll move in and try to steal the kill from the cat. And that's just, he said, they go hand in hand. So it's funny because they actually caught a wolf not far from here, and it had a tag from Wisconsin.
Right.
And just like they'll tell you there's no bears. I was driving out near that bridge we were talking about, and a freaking black bear ran right across the road in front of me. I called the DNR. They said there are no bears. A week later, a bear got hit on the interstate by a car up near Fort Wayne.
Right, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so it's just like...
That's what I thought was... I think I mentioned that too, is like, animals don't know state line boundaries.
No, they do not.
Someone says there's bears in Michigan. I was like, we're only 80 miles from Michigan. Who's to say they're not going to just travel on down?
They migrate, right? They're following food.
And
it's like, yeah, there's all kinds of things that they'll tell you aren't here that are.
Yeah.
Which leads you to the people that'll tell you that they've had Bigfoot sightings around here.
There's been a lot of those here recently.
Yeah.
I've got the Bigfoot mapping project app. And there was a recent sighting, I think 2 years ago, just up on 16 between Denver and Rowan.
There have been a couple of sightings, in the Kokomo area. And of course, Miss Sinnel, I hear people all the time. They like to send me pictures of trees that are bent over.
Right.
And if you walk any of the trails around here, you see them all the time. I took a bunch of pictures of them today. What causes that? I don't know. Do I think it's Bigfoot? I would really love it if it was.
Right.
But I don't know. But my son and I we'll go out there and we'll start, whooping and knocking and sometimes we hear stuff coming back. So
yeah, I feel like some of the trees that I see bent over, I know I've seen it before, like if in the winter times where the heavy wet snow will pull some of the little sapling trees over, bend them in a certain way. But when you get the actual formations that are really big, heavy, solid around, and they're all stacked almost like a weird cross pattern.
Right, yeah.
If it's not done by a person, then what's done? Because naturally I don't see it falling that way.
Yeah. But, it's fun. It's a fun, distraction. I'll listen to anybody that's got the story.
Mm-hmm.
It's like and that's mainly what I do is I like to collect stories. And that comes from my childhood, when people used to tell me all those stories. I grew up on a 60-acre horse farm, right? My grandparents were had sulky horses. And just like less than a quarter mile from where our trailer was this old graveyard. And I would sneak out at night and go up there and crawl up in this oak tree and watch for ghosts, because there were all these legends surrounding that place. It used to have like a fence all the way around the property, and in the corner was a gate. And as the old timers told it, if a woman approached the gate would open and let him walk through it. If a man walked up to it, it would open, and as they started to walk through, then it'd swing and hit them. So they ended up taking the gate down because people were getting hurt.
Right.
So, of course, I thought, okay, this place has got to be haunted. That's what everybody tells me. So that's where I saw my first apparition, as a little kid. And, I was hooked then. Now, fast forward, 6-7 years from then, and my mother and my grandmother had this falling out. So we had to move off the farm. And so my dad bought this house in the little nearby town. And I hated that place. But we move into it. And I find out that house used to be where a church and graveyard was.
Mm-hmm.
So when they closed down the church, they moved all the graves from there and started that little cemetery that I used to go out to and hide out in. And I was like, that's a weird synchronicity that,
right.
I moved from that graveyard to where the graveyard used to be. And our house was haunted, My dad used to get so furious. He said, "Man, you guys were making all kinds of noise last night, keeping me up." We weren't home, Dad. So.
Yeah. I haven't experienced enough to know if it's not just... We've had weird stuff that happened since we moved here, but this house is a newer house. It was built in 79, and no one's ever passed away here. So, and we're like maybe the third or fourth people that's ever lived here. So you wouldn't think there'd be anything weird here, but we've had some weird instances. And just recently, and I don't know if I've mentioned it on air, I think I may have already, but before I moved out here, one of the nails on the coffin of wanting to come out here, I just talked on an interview on someone else's show about some of the weird things that go on in the house. And I said, but luckily we haven't had anything weird going on. The next day I'm down in the basement editing this stuff, and I started to go outside because I had to put the chickens up out back. I come back in, and I made a mention about this bug earlier. There was a fly, and I noticed, because I only had half of it, I didn't have the other half yet. There was 27 dead flies on my desk that were not there, and they were only on my desk.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's weird.
So I have photos of them. I actually kept the flies. I put them in a little jar. I put a lid on, put them out in the barn or out in the garage. And I just asked my wife last week, where'd the flies go? She said, I threw those out. You're crazy. She threw them away. And then the random teeth that we've found that have come back. And
right.
So
the thing is, you say the house was only built in 79, but you don't know what happened on the property.
Right.
Right. It's like the place that I told you where the guy had committed suicide. Right. So they came in and they tore that house down, which was a fine house. There was nothing wrong with the house. It's a nice house. But they tore it down. They built a new house on top of it because they wanted to get rid of that doesn't change anything. If that place was haunted, those ghosts didn't go anywhere. Tearing down the house does not, they're not the house, the house is not the ghost, the location is. I mean, proof of that, this woman called me up one time, wanted me to come and investigate her place because they were seeing a full-bodied apparition, and they would see it come down the stairs, pass through them in the living room, and then go into the kitchen, and then go through the wall and just keep walking. And then it'd be out in the yard and then would disappear. And it was like a, kind of an elderly woman. And so we go out and I investigate the property, and I'm looking into history and stuff. And so it's like the house used to have an extension on the back. And, that was the kitchen out there. And there was a fire, and and they tore that part of it off and just closed it off. And so that ghost, it doesn't know that the kitchen isn't still there. So it came down the stairs and went out to the kitchen like it always did. It doesn't know that the building's not there anymore.
that's like residual haunting that you would think.
Yeah, that was residual. It couldn't communicate with
I say it's almost like it's just an imprint in time where it's doing the same exact pattern over and over and over.
Yeah, they call it stone tape.
Right. Yeah. We just talked about that on the recent. I hadn't ever heard that before.
Yeah.
But no, for me, it's like, I feel like if there is anything around here over the fact that I literally said we haven't had any things for a while, and then all the dead flies just on my stuff where I record, I was like, that's not like a sign of.
I would take that to heart. Something's letting you know, no, we're still here.
That's why I've noticed this bug. And next to this bug, there's also looks like a moth. So I'm just going to let my collection of bug stay here and see if I end up coming out here one night and there's just like a whole bunch of dead flies back on it.
Right.
Because.
But why there?
Yeah.
Why not on the floor?
It's literally right where I'm working. That's why I know they weren't there earlier, because I'd already been down here working on the desk, working on my editing stuff, and then I come back and there's just flies everywhere.
The only explanation I could possibly scare up on that is that you're there, you're working, you're dropping, skin residue, and maybe they're attracted to that. But why are they dead?
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
I was saying maybe because of the green lights. Maybe the light attracted them.
Sure. But they're not on all the time, right?
No. But again, how did they all show up and die within 5 minutes?
Yeah.
That is the one thing I thought was, of all the weird stuff, like we've had some weird stuff. That is the one thing that I don't know how to explain how they showed up so quickly.
I would recommend put a ring of salt all the way around the building.
Mm.
See if that might keep them out. might keep them in too.
Yeah, that's the other thing. So when it comes to the house, I went through it. I've done, I don't know what you would call it, my attempts of banishing things or whatever and saying things aren't welcome here. So
All right.
again, it's been calm, but like I said, now last week I have random security footage
Right.
popping of that thing moving.
There was a haunted location down around Indianapolis. This has been a few years back now. But what the guy did was he bought this old farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere,
Mm-hmm.
and he wanted to make money. Rent it out to people, say it was haunted. It wasn't haunted. But he needed activity. So he got this guy who was into magic, had him come in there, had him perform rituals to attract spirits, and then they salted all the doors and windows, salted around the house, and then had people come there and haunt. And he made up all these elaborate stories on why it was haunted, but people got all kinds of activity there. Was it because this guy summoned these spirits in there, like, the rumors were? Or is it that sometimes people are haunted?
Right.
Some people just attract spirits and you show up because, they're out there in the ether. I know the location that I talk about, that I run. We're very confident most of the spirits that are connected there are not from that location.
Mm-hmm.
They've come in from different places and got kind of trapped there. So that's, part of the adventure is trying to find out their story and figure out, how this came to be.
Mm-hmm. I've thought about finding one or two other people. Like, I know my brother wouldn't help me, but and do my own little investigations into certain things. Just having the kids and the family and all the stuff that we do, the sports, I just don't ever feel like I have the time to do it, especially doing this show. So it's like, what little free time I have is always wrapped into out here.
Right, sure.
So
it's hard. I mean, it's hard to find time
mm-hmm.
to go out and investigate. And it would be a lot easier if, my son was into it. He loves the paranormal from an intellectual, scholarly pursuit, but he has zero interest in going into a haunted house
right.
and kicking the tires.
Mm-hmm.
So
as I don't think anyone in my family are interested. My kids are younger, but my wife, I don't think she's interested or wants to even attempt any of that.
Yeah.
And I don't think I have very many friends that are interested in some of that either. So I know my brother and I used to watch some of the haunted shows on TV or whatever, but he's busy, I'm busy. It's just hard to...
Well, I'll have to have you over,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not too far away. Just next time I have an investigation over there, you got some free time. You don't have to stay all night. Just come over for a couple hours, check it out, and
Man,
see what happens.
that's been something I've been kicking the tires on, is I would like to do my own little investigations and stuff, just because I feel like I do my investigating back here behind a microphone.
Right. Yeah.
So I want to get out there and do things. I was supposed to go out and do one of these Bigfoot meetings they had out at Miss Cinewall, but my kid had baseball games.
Right.
So I was like, by the time I got done with games and I try and go out there, I was like, I don't want to leave my wife home with the other kids.
It's like the UFO group,
Mhm.
that they. It just never was convenient for me to go to those. I mean, it's right up my alley. I love that sort of thing. And, I love to be surrounded by people who think the same way, or at least adjacent. And I only made it to one meeting.
Yeah.
That's the one that you were at. And yeah, time is definitely a factor.
The one that I was at, I think, was one of the, I think they only did like one or two more in Peru, and I don't think they've done any since then.
Yeah, they ran into some trouble, scheduling and such. So they decided to take the summer off. I think
Okay.
they're going to start back up again. We'll see. The Fort Wayne group's starting to have issues, so
Yeah.
who knows?
It's hard to manage things, especially when you have multiple people involved in it and having to schedule it with other things. So
Yeah.
that's, again, part of why I don't do music anymore is because I don't have to rely on I have to rely on guests, which sometimes when we talk about paranormal stuff, you talk about ghost stuff, a lot of guests ghost me. So there's that.
Right.
I was supposed to do an interview tomorrow night, and the person asked me to remind them, and so I reminded them, and now they're double booked, so they can't do mine. I was like, well, you're scheduling mine first, but whatever.
Right, yeah. Luckily, you have a kind of a back catalog.
Right. Now,
But,
so my schedule gets pretty full,
yeah,
so
I imagine so.
it's, sometimes I say it's a blessing. I'm not going to ever say no. Like, I don't want to interview people, but it's getting to the point now to where it's like, I'm already booked out over 2 months in advance, and I start feeling bad because I have people record with me and they're, when's my episode coming out? 3 months from now.
Yeah, right, right.
So I was like, that's why I started releasing 2 episodes a week, because I was getting such a big backlog.
Right.
I would prefer to only have to do 1 a week, but I do so many interviews, and I'm afraid if I don't keep up with interviews, then I'm not going to get people wanting to come on the show, and then it's going to be even worse. So
It's the kind of thing where, you'd almost want to do it live, sort of like coast to coast,
Mhm.
right? And it's like, hey, tune in, and it's live. Just, there it is, warts and all. But then you have the problem of,
that they don't show up.
yeah, right? And then, well, luckily, you could always call me,
Yeah.
right? Like, okay, yeah, sure. But, yeah, and you could do a call-in show.
That's what I've been trying to do with the live call-ins, but the few that I've done, very few people have called in. I've had the number up there for them to call, and I've
Right.
had like a couple people call. I'm supposed to be doing another live at the end of this month, so we'll see how that one goes.
Right. See, like whenever people do those things, I'm always like, oh yeah, and I'll put it on my calendar.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then I'm busy.
Right.
Or it's like
Yeah.
How do you find the time for everything?
I always try and do the last Thursday of the month. That's what I've been trying. I haven't done one the last 2 months because I took the whole month of July off, and then I had a normal interview this past into August. So I just didn't end up doing the live because someone else that has a bigger show was doing live at the same time. And then other podcasts that are bigger took the name that I was using and using it for their name. So I'm like,
Right.
I'm probably going to remarket what I'm doing and not, even though I've had that name first, I'm not going to try and
Right.
I don't know. That kind of rubbed me the wrong way, but whatever.
Well, yeah, you hate to rebrand.
Right.
That's, I remember, one of the first thing I did was grab occultdetective.com.
Mm-hmm.
And I could not tell you how many people have contacted, hey, I want to buy that off of you. No,
Mm-hmm.
no, I'm not letting it go for any amount of money. It's just because it's what I do, right? And it's, but then you catch people that are, doing variants on that. Like if you go on Twitter, you'll find people that, I'm at Occult Detective everywhere,
Right.
Facebook, Instagram. So they'll be like, they'll have my name, it'll say Occult Detective. And then, but then the URL, they'll like just put a squiggly mark or whatever. And it's like, just come up with something else, I'll tell you the strangest thing in that regard. I'm sitting there and I get this email, because, I search my name in case, interviews and stuff pop up, whatever. So there's this movie out. You can go onto YouTube, look it up. There's a trailer for it. Bob Freeman, what was the Paranormal Exterminator or something like that, right? So you watch the trailer and there's this guy, hi, my name's Bob Freeman and I'm an occult detective. I go out and I hunt, and it's like, the guy's got better hair than me, but he's got the goatee and he's sitting there And it's sort of like a Shaun of the Dead kind of show. So I'm like, what the hell? So I contact them. I say, well, what's up with this? And they say, oh, we just thought the name sounded cool. And I'm like, you're quoting my website. The lines he's saying are right from my website. You know, my tagline. You're using my tagline. You know, like, I know you had to get it for me. Now, the movie didn't end up, you know, making a lot of money, but it still is like, are you kidding me?
Right.
It's my name.
I recently found out by searching, again, my podcast name, I've been finding people have been taking my episodes, like the audio, and making videos on their own channels. Not even the people that have been doing the interviews.
Right.
Yeah, I found, again, the conspiracy stuff, but like, kind of comes with the territory, but they took one of the Flat Earth episodes that had talked to someone about, and they put it up on their own Flat Earth dedicated channel, but they took my audio and they've gotten a lot more views on their YouTube video than mine ever did.
Oh, wow.
So I'm like, that's kind of shitty. But I've noticed other people too of like, hey, can I have this? Can I have that? Like if they're a guest, I don't mind giving the audio to them or whatever. Like, sure. Like it's your interview. I don't care. But when you take it without asking and upload it on your own stuff, and I've had someone reach out and be like, they want to come on the show, but they didn't want me to release the episode. They wanted to release it on their own stuff. I was like, why would I do that?
Yeah, that's pretty... Now, what you should do is you got a YouTube channel, just put it in your playlist, you know, so that you're the one getting the hits. They go to your playlist, they watch it, but you're getting the hits, not me.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
So no, like I said, I posted something about that the other day because I just noticed it. And I'm like, typically I don't care. I'm not one that worries about the money situations, but I think it's kind of shitty when someone's making money off something they had nothing to do with.
Right.
Like they weren't the guest. They didn't edit it. They didn't do all this. I did all the work. And someone's just going to steal the audio and put it out there. That's kind of weird.
It's, you know, you look at like AI and all that stuff, right? You know, it's the same thing. People trying to not do work, and make, money from it.
Right. No, that's the thing that I don't even really promote, like the thing that I wrote last year, because I wrote all the stuff about the little book that I wrote, but because I used like Microsoft Word and then I used Grammarly. And then I ran it to format through like I think it was the AI interview that I did. I used the same thing to like format everything in like book form because I don't know how to write as a book.
Right.
And then after, I didn't go back and like proofread everything, but after I did and had them printed, I started reading it and it changed the words and stuff around some of the ways I said, like I did. Right. It made things differently. Like now to me, it looks like it's not authentic to me anymore because the computer, the artificial intelligence or whatever.
Right.
They went in, it made it a little bit better. It edited it for me and it changed wording, but it made it say the same thing like 15 different times.
Right.
But,
I read it. So
yeah. So for me, I'm like, I don't even promote the book at this point because it's like 90% what I wrote. And then the rest of it's whatever the computer decided it wanted to change it to. So I'm like, that's stupid.
Yeah.
But
of course, you know, sometimes those mistakes happen. You know, I've got a novel called Descendant, and it did all right, but I was trying to pad out the word count, right? And so I always keep these little sniglets of things that I've written, and then I'll just bring them into a story and make a scene from it. Well, I did this in the book, but I didn't remember that I had done it earlier. So it's the exact same scene almost, but you know, you kind of rewrite it a little bit to make it fit this. And so like when I caught that after it was published, I'm like, oh my God. But then I get a review on it, right? And somebody said, that was brilliant the way that I did those two mirrored scenes, you know, and I'm like, no, you know, I didn't do that on purpose, but the reviewer just loved it. You know, like, okay. Sometimes
Yeah.
you get lucky, you know, but
I've thought about going in and re-editing it to where it removes all the stuff that it added in there.
right.
But then I'm like, I've already had these books printed out, so what am I supposed to do with I guess their first edition.
You're right. Yeah. Well, you know what? Hey, look, it's a,
But to me, it's just, I did it out of boredom. I wrote it over a weekend,
right, sure.
and I was just like, okay, I'm going to run it through this. Like, I don't know anything about how to format things
Right.
I was like, with technology, they claim it can help. So I threw it in there, and it was just giving me this many pages back. So I just was just taking copying it, putting it over there. I didn't read the whole thing over again because I knew what I wrote.
Right.
So I just assumed that it was going to leave it be.
Now people are writing whole novels with it.
No.
You know, like you can go in there and say, write me a scene in which this, and this happens, and make it, 10,000 words. It'll kick it out.
It's craziness.
Yeah. And then they'll tell you how great a writer they are. You read it, it's not, it's not great, but it's,
It's passable.
yeah. And it's like, okay. And it's like the art, that's like they think they're an artist because they typed in a sentence
Mm-hmm.
in a program. And I like a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
It looks great. That computer knows how to steal.
Yeah.
And steal well.
Like my artwork that I use right now, I used AI to make it because I'm pretty much DIY.
Yeah.
So I got to do what I got to do. But I have,
They look great.
Easton, who did all my artwork, I've asked him to design me actual artwork for the podcast artwork. So
Right.
whenever that gets done, I'm going to switch over and pay him
Nice.
just to.
So he's in Wabash.
Yep. He lives in Wabash.
Yeah.
But he is amazing artist. He does a lot of stuff. He just did he's involved with the Frogman movie that just came out recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's like I haven't watched it yet. I've been wanting to, but basically it was like a found footage movie of Frogman.
Yeah.
Now they're doing a sequel.
Nice. Yeah, that's great.
But no, it's the interview, like I said, it came out the other day, but I've known him for a long time because he's also been in bands too.
Right.
So the other guy that I interviewed here, I used to be in a band with. The girl that I'd interviewed, Ariel, she is engaged to my friend Braden, who I was in a band with. So most of the people,
right, yeah.
it seems to be all
Yep.
band related.
You'd be amazed at how the connection between the paranormal and music,
Mm.
right? Like I'm sure John Tenney, right? He's a paranormal lecturer, UFO guy.
I've heard the name, I think, but I don't know.
But he was in punk bands,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just so when you talk to him, you always end up talking music instead of
Yeah. No, I seen a meme recently, and I never felt more attacked ever. It said, middle-aged white guys, either once they hit their middle age or whatever, I forget how it was actually, but basically says one of two things: you either get a fascination with smoking meats or you start a podcast. I was like, well, I've done both because I bought a smoker and now I'm doing a podcast. I was like, well, damn it, I'm the typical meme, I guess. Of this
Right. Yeah.
middle-aged white guy doing a podcast and smoking meats.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else you would like to talk about? I'm sure you got tons of things you can, but we've been going on for almost an hour and a half.
Yeah. Good. Right now I'm working on an Occult Detective role-playing game, my son and I, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're taking all these cryptids and fae and, classic monsters and stuff and putting it in a game format
Mm-hmm.
where you get to be a paranormal investigator in like a, sort of like Dungeons and Dragons kind of thing, and it came from, we used to do this every Halloween. We get together and we'd play a game scenario, usually in a haunted house, and say, and I'd drop it on them. Okay, we're playing this game. You only have what you have on you, and you only have the things here, and then we go through and I make up a story, for them to adventure in. And so we're putting this game together, and it's got its own deck of tarot cards, and all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of fun and kind of gives us something to do as a family.
Is there any events that you're going to be at here in the upcoming months?
Well, I'll be at Peru Unity, and so I'll be on a lot of podcasts. And that's the thing now, right? The Halloween season.
Right.
It's my busiest time of year. We're always reaching out, and so I'll be all over the internet, and I'm at occultdetective.com. I think I mentioned earlier. I'm at Occult Detective on all the different platforms. So.
That's the one thing that I wish I would have been able to do on a lot of my stuff. 'Cause I am on most of it, but there's the other Tinfoil Tales that a lot of people apparently find. That's the Australian one.
Yes. Yeah.
And I have tinfoiltales.com. My Facebook is Tinfoil Tales. The Twitter's Tinfoil Tales. Most of it is, but like Instagram, I couldn't take it. So it's Tinfoil Tales Podcast.
Right. It's close, but
I wish they would just stop being a podcast. I know that sounds bad. As far as I know, they're still active. I was like, but I started mine first.
Yeah. Hang up your hat, boys. It's not that hard to do a Google search, and see that there's somebody else out there.
Yeah. I think we both started in the same time frame. Like, I think I started just a couple of weeks or months maybe earlier, but just the random name and timing of everything is just...
Right. And I also listen to another Tinfoil Hat.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I listen to her sometimes.
Yeah. So. There's also, I've mentioned it before, but like Sam Tripoli does the Tinfoil Hat with Sam Tripoli.
Yeah.
He's like the most biggest podcast out there for conspiracy type stuff. And I wasn't a podcaster, so I didn't know anything about podcast really. So I didn't do a whole lot of research when I thought of this name up, because I thought of this back during the pandemic.
Right.
So I'm just like, hey, I come up with this name and never had this idea, and I just never did anything with it. And then finally, when I decided I'm going to do it 2 years later, I already had the name. I already kind of rolled with it.
Right.
And then I started looking more into podcasts and found out there's more people using this type of stuff.
It's a great name, and if you got tinfoiltales.com, then you're gold.
All right. I actually just got my renewal in the email the other day claiming I had to pay for that again. So
yeah.
I did. You mentioned people are trying to buy it. I got offered something for not this one, but another website that I had, but I'm not even renewing that website. So I'm like, I might just sell that one because
if you're not going to renew it, get coin.
Well, Bob, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Pleasure for me as well.
We'll see you at Peru Unity, and I'm sure I'll see you around here soon with some other stuff, but we're both going to be at Peru Unity. I'm speaking, apparently this year it's Peru Unity. I'm speaking at the Crawfordsville Paranormal thing they've got going on there.
Nice.
So I was supposed to be at a Bigfoot thing in Michigan next week, but it got canceled. And then the first annual Bigfoot conference is at the end of the month, and it's sold out. Right. That's down in Nashville, so I'm hoping that one turns out really good.
Yeah, good luck with it.
So, again, for anyone out there listening, make sure to check out occultdetective.com for more about Bob Freeman. And thank you for listening. We're going to wrap this one up. So thanks to Bob, and thanks for listening. And that's the show, everyone. I really hope you guys enjoyed the conversations. If you would like to be a guest on Tinfoil Tales, remember to send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com or go to the contact section of tinfoiltales.com. Just get your message to me. We'll get something scheduled for a future episode. And just remember, the truth lies in the stories we share, the connections we make. Stay curious, stay open-minded. Thank you all for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep exploring the unknown. Good night, everyone.
Tinfoil Tales in the headphones. Yeah, it's time to rock. Got a story about a cryptid creature. Let's take a walk. Bigfoot, dogman, they're out there in the dark. But the truth is out there like an alien spark. UFO sightings got the whole world shook. Conspiracies unfold like a story in a book. Media control, trying to keep us blind. Oh, before gonna use my own mind. In history, they don't want us to know the secrets they hide, the truth they won't show. Domain of society, they keep us in chains. control, trying to keep us blind. But I won't be fooled, gonna use my own mind. In history